This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heilar.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick. We should say, now that recording is on, also just remind everyone that tonight Seth was tied up with other obligations. So we're having our good friend John sit in for him tonight, who is the, do I go with Lore Master for this version of the D&D style podcast, I'll call it? Lore Master?
Yeah, it's stuck. I like it. It's fun. It's not as generic as Game Master or Dungeon Master.
They all basically mean the same thing. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you guys should all go check out the Just Roll With It podcast, which is a part of our Wheel of Time spoilers, Mistborn spoilers, the whole Fox and Raven Media umbrella. We have a couple of things going on. Definitely go check them out. And yeah, this is John. These are a couple of intense chapters here. Well, at least the first one.
There's some shit that happens. When Seth said, hey, these are the chapters I'm looking at giving you, and I looked and realized they were battle chapters, I sort of went off the deep end. So I have lots of potential tangents, so I don't think we're going to have a problem. I will be able to fill content for you if you don't want to necessarily read everything.
Oh, for sure. I was thinking about that because I saw some of your messages telling me about that earlier today and how you had prepped for these. And there are definitely some things that I set to read that I would love to talk about just tactically. And
perfect.
I imagine you looked at a map and things, but I don't have quite that level of detail. But there should be some really interesting stuff and generally fun. So you do your tangents.
I will tangent. Oh yes,
free.
I will tangent away. Anybody who plays D&D with me or listens to the podcast will know that I love hearing myself talk. So this will not be a problem.
How do you feel about getting to the battle for Kyrian?
Let's do this.
That's by the way what I've always called this chapter, the battle for Kyrian or the battle at Kyrian, because it's kind of a battle outside of Kyrian.
Yeah. Technically, according to the wiki and everything that I was seeing, they call this the second battle of Kyrian, because technically the first battle of Kyrian would be during the Aiel War, when the Aiel came over and stomped Kyrian into the ground and then left.
Oh, that's a good point, yeah. And this is Chapter 44, The Lesser Sadness, and her symbol is the dragon banner. Rand's shirt clung to him with the sweat of effort, but he kept his coat on for protection from the wind gusting toward Kyrian. The sun had at least another hour to reach its noonday peak, yet already he felt as if he had run all morning and had been beaten with a club at the finish. Wrapped in the void, he was only distantly aware of the weariness, dimly perceiving the ache in arms and shoulders, in the small of his back, a throb around the tender scar in his side. That he was aware of them at all told the story. With the power in him, he could make out individual leaves on the trees at 100 paces, but whatever happened to him physically should have been as if it were happening to someone else. He had long since taken to drawing on Sidene through an angreal in his pocket, the stone carving of the fat little man. Even so, working the power was a strain now, weaving it at this distance of miles, but only the rancid thread streaking what he drew kept him from pulling more, from trying to pull it all to him. The power was that sweet, taint or no. After hours of channeling without rest, he was that tired. At the same time, he had to fight Sidene itself harder, to put more of his strength into keeping it from burning him to ash where he stood, from burning his mind to ash. It was ever more difficult to hold off Sidene's destruction, more difficult to resist the desire to draw more difficult to handle what he did draw, a nasty downward spiral, and hours to go before the battle was decided. Wiping sweat from his eyes, he gripped the platform's rough railing. He was near the brink, yet he was stronger than Egwene or Avienda. The Aiel woman was standing, peering off toward Kyrian and the storm clouds, occasionally bending to stare through the long looking-glass. Egwene sat cross-legged, leaning back against an upright, still covered in gray bark, her eyes closed. They both looked as worked out as he felt. Before he could do anything, not that he knew what, he had no skill at healing, Egwene's eyes popped open, and she stood, exchanging a few quiet words with Avienda, that the wind snatched away from even his Sidene-enhanced hearing. Then Avienda sat down in Egwene's place, and let her head fall back against the upright. The black clouds around the city continued to stab lightning, but they were wild forks, far more often than single lances now. So they were taking turns, giving each other a rest. It would have been nice to have someone to do that with him, but he did not regret telling Asmodean to stay in his tent. He would not have trusted him to channel, especially not now. Who could say what he would have done if he saw Rand weakened as he was? Staggering slightly, Rand pulled his looking-glass around to study the hills outside the city. Life was certainly visible there now, and death. Wherever he looked, there was fighting. Aiel against Aiel, 1,000 here, 5,000 there, swarming over the treeless hills and too closely meshed for him to do anything. He could not find the column of horse and pike. 3 times he had seen them, once fighting, twice their number of Aiel. He was certain they were still out there. Small hope that Melonrill had decided to obey his orders at this late juncture. Choosing the man just because he had the grace to be embarrassed by Wiramon's behavior had been a mistake, but there had been little time to make a choice, and he had to get rid of Wiramon. Nothing to be done about it now. Maybe one of the Kyrianen could be put in command, if even his direct order would make the Terrans follow a Kyrianen. A milling mass right at the city's high gray wall caught his eye. Tall, iron-bound gates stood open, Aiel battling horsemen and spearmen, almost in the open, while folk tried to close the gates. Tried and failed because of the press of bodies. Horses with empty saddles and armored men unmoving on the ground half a mile from the gate, marked where the sortie had been driven back. Arrows rained down from the walls, and head-sized chunks of rubble, even occasional spears slashing down with enough force to split 2 men, or 3, though he still could not see from where exactly, but the Aiel were going over their dead, ever closer to forcing their way in. A quick scan showed him 2 more columns of Aiel trotting toward the gates, perhaps 3,000 all told. He did not doubt they were Cúladins as well. He was aware of grinding his teeth. If the Shaido got inside Cairhien, he would never drive them north. He would have to dig them out, street by street. The cost in lives would dwarf the number of those already dead, and the city itself would end a ruin, like Einrad or Tain. Cairhienin and Shaido were mingled like ants in a bowl, but he had to do something. Taking a deep breath, he channeled. The 2 women had set the conditions, bringing the storm clouds. He did not need to be able to see their weavings to take advantage of them. Stark, silver-blue lightning struck into the Aiel, once, twice, again, as fast as a man could clap.
Sure, I have lots of things for what you've already said, so we can start there.
I perceive this whole scene as basically Rand's exhausted, and I feel like you can kind of see it in his mind, like his thoughts even seem a little clunky.
He's slipping. He's very easily distracted, and he seems like he's just sort of seeing what's in front of him, but it's not penetrating very far. He's just reporting exactly what he's seeing. I wanted to go macro for a second, and then sort of shrink in. The general landmass size, the agreed landmass size of the Westlands or Randland, is slightly larger than the contiguous U.S., is kind of roughly how people put it. It's like 3,600 miles from coast to spine of the world-ish. The information that I could find on the population of Randland in total is roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 million. So when you're looking at the number of people that are participating in this battle, Cúladin has roughly 160,000 Shaido on his side. Rand has about double that, so 320,000, divided into 7 clans. He also has about 900 mounted Terrans and 900 mounted Kyrianen, and several thousand light Kyrianen foot soldiers. And then, it hasn't mentioned it yet, but there are 4 clans that are still sort of undecided, and they roughly equal Cúladin's Aiel. So there's about 160,000 of them. So when you total it all up, approximately 4.5% of the entire population of Randland is participating in this one battle around Cairhien.
I'm kind of glad you brought that up, because I've never actually heard that number before. So that would basically be like if everyone in the United States died except for 1 out of every 2 Californians.
Yeah.
Everyone else dead. That it would be approximately like that many people for the same amount of land.
And so then you're looking at almost 4.5% of that whole population in this one central area fighting in this battle. So when Rand is exhausted, so he's very casually saying things like, oh, there's 1,000 over there, or there's 5,000 over there. And it's very difficult to comprehend exactly how many people that freaking is. There's almost 1 million people crammed into the square mile area that's not very big.
So we have these 160,000 undeclared that are sitting, waiting. No one knows where they're going to go. 160,000 Shaido, 160,000 approximately again of Rand's Aiel, who are now fighting for Cairhien. Cairhien's gates were closed at the beginning of the battle. We can assume the Shaido probably moved to assault the city or were preparing to when Rand's forces assaulted them, the idea being to slam them up against the walls, hopefully, and break them so that they would start to run. Now, it looks like the Cairhienan leaders opened the front gates after perchance the Shaido were distracted or repelled and tried to do what's called or basically a short assault. So to run cavalry out the door, attack, do some damage, return, lock the gates before they can get back. Now, it looks like the Shaido were fast enough or gave the Cairhienan enough problems that there is now a battle or a small battle, a big fight happening in the gates. So the gates can't be closed, which is why Rand kills basically everyone there so that the gates can be closed, so that he doesn't have to dig the Shaido out of the city later.
Yes, that's pretty accurate. And the way, so if you imagine just the overhead map of Cairhien, Rand's force is divided. He's divided his force in half, so he's basically on par with the Shaido, which is difficult in military terms because the Roman army, when the Roman Empire was at its peak, generally preferred 2-to-1 or even 3-to-1 if they could get it. Dividing your force in half to be on a 1-for-1 ratio with your opponent doesn't leave you a whole lot of room for basically anything. You're going to have to just go and hope.
I left out in my initial description that Rand split his forces in half, which is why he's putting 160,000 approximately against Couladin's 160,000 and holding the same number in reserve in case those other clans turn against him.
Half that's not actively engaging the Shaido is engaged in a variety of blocking options. He has some that are going to be a holding force to the east. He doesn't want them to escape back into the waste. So he's got a small force aligned along the east, basically to do the hammer and anvil. He's going to have a holding force there, so if they do try and charge east, he can hold them long enough for other forces to detach and come and hit them from the sides and behind. And he also has another force that's arranged somewhat like you said, just in case those unaligned clans start to pour down and be against him, he wants to have a holding force. He wants to have a blocking force to give him more time to get other forces to the area before he gets completely overwhelmed. So because he's got those 4 unaligned clans that he has to deal with, that dictates his battle tactic. If those 4 unaligned clans had been on his side, he would have numerical superiority, and he would be able to go in and basically try and squish them against the walls of Cairhien and eliminate them entirely. At this point, his only goal is to inflict enough casualties that they break and flee north. He's trying to direct them to the north and to the west, away from Cairhien, so that he can chase them down later.
Right, of which there's very little in between Cairhien and Tarvalin, basically. I'm tempted to pull up a map myself to take a look at it, but there's not very much at all.
Not a whole lot significant, no. If they get free out there, it would be, at the speed that the Aiel can run, it would be devastating. Speaking as a modern combat vet, urban warfare scares the shit out of me. When I first came back from my deployments, I had a hard time walking around downtown Seattle because every window could have been somebody with a sniper scope with a gun. And there are thousands of windows in downtown Seattle. You feel so paranoid. You feel so you just feel like they're so unknown. And in a medieval setting, you would have to go into every building. You'd have to dig them out of every room, of every house, of every inn, of every warehouse, every basement. It would, and he correctly notates, it would, the cost would go way up in comparison to what it was essentially worth.
Open combat in a more like a pitched battle, as you would call it.
Exactly. And like Metal is saying in the Discord, Vietnam combat experience that he was relying on, urban warfare is gross, because you're walking down a street and then all of a sudden your buddy next to you is down with a head wound and you don't know where it came from. Or you're, crouching and hiding between small fragments of rubble, because literally anywhere you could fit someone in a modern setting, obviously, but anywhere you could hide a person, you can hide a person with a gun. And you have to basically swarm the city to root them out, and they would become a huge pain. And reading that part actually gave me goosebumps, because having been in urban combat environments, it still gives me jitters. It still scares the shit out of me. So urban warfare is not something that would be good for anybody. It heavily favors the defender over the attacker. It would wreck the city, because they would be able to set fires for distractions. They would drop buildings to cause other casualties. It would be absolutely brutal. So Rand needs them as far away from the city as possible, as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I'm relating to Christina. It gives me anxiety thinking about it when you're saying, like, you can be walking down a street and all of a sudden your buddy's shot and laying on the ground, and you don't even know which direction to run and hide in, because you don't even know where the shots are coming from. So where do you run and hide between this wall or that wall? Are they behind you or in front of you, to your left, to your right?
In the case of Vietnam, sort of the classic case study is the Battle of Hue. The Hue is a old stone religious city from way back in Vietnam's history, and it was the very beginning of the Tet Offensive. They sort of rose up in this city and were taking it over. The battle lasted forever. Sometimes advances were measured in yards. If the U.S. line advanced 3 yards in 48 hours, that was considered a victory, because there was just so much built up space that they would send whole squads into buildings. You're watching 8, 9, 10 guys go into a building and nobody ever comes out, because there's one guy at the top of a staircase with a machine gun, and as everybody's walking up the stairs, he just pulls the trigger and they all go down in a row, and you've lost 10 guys.
You know what else this makes me think of a bit? As a history buff, some of the huge battles during World War II that were centered around cities like Stalingrad or Berlin, right there at the very end. Oh, yeah. Infamous, where like I won't be able to remember all the facts, but the Russian general in charge got eczema so bad he had to have his body wrapped in bandages because he was just so stressed out that, I have eczema. I get it. If you get enough stress, you just start getting rashes.
Oh, yeah. And yeah, any of those sort of modern military examples of urban warfare, it is always brutal, and it's horrifying.
That battle, I think, lasted a year and a quarter or something like that, with several million dead.
Yes.
Don't quote me. Maybe 1.5 million, but still. It's like the population of this entire state.
The Russians always had large amounts of casualties in their battles anyway, but Stalingrad was particularly bad. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to bring up was the part where he talks about the commander being basically just chosen for his ability to not be Weiramon, however it's pronounced. That also traditionally sucks as a battle tactic. If you're putting the politically expedient people in charge that don't necessarily know what's going on, you are going to get people killed. And it's obvious. I don't think it's mentioned. I think it's mentioned later on in the chapter, but this particular commander is dead. By the time we get to Matt's POV here in the next paragraph or so, they're on their third commander of the yes. horses, because this was this was just a guy who knew how to say yes sir and take orders, and had no idea what to do battle wise. Again, if I'm going to pull Vietnam experience, the young officers always want to prove themselves, especially in Kyrian when it's all about the glory and all about, the family honor and all that sort of shit. You get the officers like in We Were Soldiers. They send a platoon out to secure the LZ, and they have one bad guy who goes running off, and the young field officer is like, ooh, we're going to get glory by getting him. Come on, boys, we're going to get him. And they all leap up, and they all run, and they run smack dab into a goddamn ambush. And they're all dead. Or they're all, that becomes the lost platoon that you see that they're basically trapped for a day and a night where they're having to lay on their stomachs because the bullets are cracking right above their heads. And the politically expedient versus the knowledgeable subject matter experts is never a good trade-off for usually the common soldier, because they're the ones that have to be like, well, we're about to follow this idiot into battle, we're all going to die now.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, luckily, they have a Taveran that kind of randomly wandered into their midst and has decided that he can't just leave them to die.
Oh, he tries. It just doesn't work out well. Well, I guess it does work out well, but it doesn't work out for Matt's plan of trying to get the hell out of there.
I guess I also sort of wanted to read as Rand strikes the gates, or I should say the fighting happening at the gates while the Kyriani are trying to close them. He does, and I read that part, but he thinks shortly after, how many won't make it back inside? How many of my own did I kill? The cold truth was that it did not matter. It had to be done, and it was done, and well it was. Yeah.
Well, the choice is kill a dozen or so of your own people, or let the Shido into the city, and that's not a choice. That's the cold hard truth of war. Is sometimes people are gonna die, and it's bad.
RJ made the point of giving us that there are one or two different columns of probably Shido. It's. I feel like RJ makes it ambiguous. On purpose, probably, that there are a bunch of Aiel heading toward the gates, and Rand may or may not understand which Aiel are heading towards the gates, but he thinks it's approximately 3,000 that are headed toward it, and if they're Shido, if the gates are just held open, once they arrive, the Shido have the gates. They have the city. Now Rand is doing a siege, rather than assaulting an army that is trying to do a siege. Now Rand is the besieger.
There's a lot of lightning in this episode, and I just recently got back into Magic the Gathering, and I was like, everybody's just tapping that red mana and just lightning bolting the shit out of it. Each 1-2 red, a good 3 damage lightning bolt will get you some good damage done. But the cold truth is people die in war. The fog of war is something else that you see really prevalent in this.
That's why Rand builds has his tower built.
Right. Well, and he doesn't know of this column of Aiel that's heading to the gates. He doesn't know if they're good, quote, or bad. And that directly plays into both Jordan and Mai's military experience, where you don't know what's happening. The guy that you walk by on the street in civilian clothes could turn around and have a suicide vest or a pistol. It's not a classic clean battle where everyone's got banners and you know who is on which side. Battle and war is messy and it's dirty and you don't always know what's going on. And Rand's got his tower built, but even still then it shows up here in a couple of paragraphs. He's able to see things, and so because he's channeling, he's able to directly influence the battle. But other than that, the battle proceeds at the speed with which communication is. So the only option would be write a message or send a messenger, hope the messenger doesn't die on the way to deliver it to whoever he needs to deliver it to,
or the way back,
and then hope that the unit he delivered the message to is able to respond the way he wants to. And by the time that happens, the bad guy has already made 3 or 4 extra moves. So it's not like there's no, this isn't Total War. There's no click, drag, and point and have your guys immediately alter course. You're kind of watching everything play out in real time, but you're not able to affect things in real time, and that can get really aggravating as a field commander.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, you're basically so when he's watching the 3,000 Aiel charge at the gate, he's like, well, either I kill some of my people and the 3,000 are mine, and it's just 3,000. It's just a dozen people I've killed, or I'm saving the city from a column of 3,000 Aiel digging themselves in, and I have to choose the lesser evil or the lesser sadness, and hope that these deaths aren't in vain, and I'm actually protecting the city and accomplishing my goal.
Well, I think I can say definitively that Rand made a good decision as a leader of this battle. I don't know quite what to call him, a general or whatever. Keeping those gates closed. If the Shaido had gotten
it would have been so much worse.
I mean, the whole plot of these novels would have to change.
Yeah, it would have been so much worse.
It could take a year to get them out. Who knows? Is there food in there? I'm not sure. Maybe a little. Or
yeah, it was the best move tactically. It just sucks because people are people.
Say it now. I was kind of thinking as we were talking about modern warfare, like in relation to what's happening here. Rand is acting in a way like air support. But air support before there was really good communication between the ground and the air. So he has to make these decisions sort of maybe more like a little bit more of a World War II thing where he's up above and he can see a lot, but he has to decide what's the enemy, what isn't, what are the right places to hit and what are not, purely based on sight from a mile away or 2 miles away, which is extremely difficult.
He's not seeing the whole field. He's only seeing that bit of the field that's closest to him. And he's a magic artillery striker, or he's sort of air support, but he has no communication with the ground. So he may be...
Yeah, maybe a bit more like artillery.
He may be accidentally, helping a unit that doesn't need his help, whereas this unit over here that he can't see, he can't see the unit of horse and pike, which could definitely use his help. I mean, they're fine because they have Matt, but he doesn't know that. And so
right.
It's very much like I'm just doing what I can. I don't know if I'm helping. I don't know if I'm hurting. And I have a whole section on pike tactics once we get there. Push of pike is a whole thing that it's like super interesting to me. So that'll be fun to talk about too. But in the moment, he's
John. I love this stuff.
He's like, I'm just doing what I can, how I can. And he's, as a person, as a channeler, as a human being right now, he's probably operating at like -2%. He is so done. He is so exhausted, but he can't not do what he's doing.
You can tell straight up from what I read how his thoughts are like creaky and slow. Like he's that tired already. I know we all know a bit what that's like. No matter what your experiences are, you've probably been so tired at some point that you make really bad decisions or you just say dumb stuff. Everybody's been there.
You start, your brain kind of goes in a different way and you're like, oh, that's, some of us have driven home from somewhere and you're like, when did I get home? Shit. Okay. I'm glad I drove safely, but you don't remember the drive or any of that. He's definitely at that phase of just utter exhaustion, and it's not helped with the fact that he's also injured and exhausted, and his brain is having to do 12 different things, and no one ever thinks correctly on no one ever multitasks when they're exhausted well. You fail at everything badly.
And that's an important point. I'm glad that just came up, actually, because just after some of the readings that I just did and the things we were talking about, short group of, I believe it's 1, 2, 3, what do I call it? Lightnings?
Lightning strikes, maybe, or something. Yeah.
Lightning strikes, yes. March their way toward his tower and then hit... It seems to me like maybe one of the legs explodes and the whole thing goes down. 1 out of 4 and it starts to lean. But they strike his maidens first, which I thought was a little interesting. I can't say, do you know, John, is this Samael that is doing these attacks?
It's
who's attacking Rand back?
Well, so this is one of the interesting things. We've had this discussion in the Discord about unreliable narrators. At first, he thinks it's Asmodean. Like, his first thought is, what the hell? And I knew I couldn't trust that asshole. And well, right, it's not. I think we've generally all assumed that it's Samael. The way I equated it to was the way it says it kind of walks it in. When, again, modern military experience, when you're walking in short-range mortar fire, or artillery, when you're ranging in, what you do is you fire your first round, and you see where it explodes, and you can adjust from there. And with artillery, now obviously we have GPS and stuff, but especially in World War II, it was you adjust the angle of the barrel, and you kind of swing left or right, and that's how you decide. So I imagine these 3 bolts are kind of like, not quite, hitting the tower. I don't necessarily, I can speak words, know if Samael's goal was to hit the maidens or if they were just collateral damage. I think he was probably after Rand just to shake him up. And so he...
Yeah, I think he wants to bait Rand to chase him. And I think attacking the maidens is a great way to do that. Whether or not Samael understood that, I don't know. Attacking the maidens specifically.
I don't know if it was attacking the maiden specifically or if it was just attacking the group that happened to be near him or if it was just sort of magical ranging shots before he zapped him. You know, he was definitely going for the tower. He definitely wants to distract him. He wants to get him angry so that he's not thinking more clearly, so that he goes for him because he knows, I mean, he's the Dragon Reborn. He's very powerful. However, at the state that he's currently in, Samael thinks he can take him.
Yes, that's what I wanted to bring up, that now that Rand is this tired, this is when the first attack comes. Not well before, when a counterattack could have done some good to protect the Shaido, but Samael doesn't care about the Shaido. The Shaido are a distraction that he knows that Rand cares about, but Samael doesn't.
Right.
He doesn't care whether these people live or die. What he cares about is drawing the dragon to him, enraging him, to make him emotional and make him make bad decisions, essentially. One of which would be to jump on his horse and run down into the battle and go find this channeler who has attacked and done this egregious insult, whatever. Whatever you want to say about it. But Rand is exhausted. So what's he going to do when he gets there?
He's going to lose, which is the point.
Fail
exactly.
Is what he's going to do.
And in the meantime, even if he was somehow to magically succeed, which Samael obviously doesn't think he would, it's enough of a distraction where he's hoping that even if he doesn't, because I sort of got the feeling, just based off of, further on in the books, Samael's trying to bait him, trying to be like, hey, come follow me. And even if he's not going to confront Rand, if he gets Rand to focus on him and chase him, he's not assisting in the battle. He's not dropping those lightning bolts at the critical moment to save Kyrian from a column of Shaido. He could basically lose the battle and lose the war because he would stop focusing on aiding the forces that he's got and potentially lose the fight. And the loser army is always hounded and crushed eventually.
Harried is the term that Matt uses as kind of anachronistic term, but to harry the forces as they retreat is the way that they understand it. To keep them running, keep them moving, keep them tired, keep them afraid to turn around so that you can continue to pick them off one by one as they run away for days or weeks or whatever.
Not give them a break.
And if you guys remember a couple of episodes ago when Matt and Asmodean were sitting in a room and Matt's waiting for Rand to arrive because he wants to tell him he's going to leave. Lan walks in and surreptitiously, I don't know if you can even call it that, says something like, so, what do you think, Matt? Should we just take all our forces and slam them right against the Shaido? I mean, we have twice their number. We should win, right? And Matt's like, no, you shouldn't do that. Because it's much more complicated than that.
I love how, we're going to get to it in just a couple of paragraphs, but at this point, the memories have become so integrated with him that he doesn't even think about the fact that they're memories. He looks at the terrain and he's like, over there's that's gonna suck over there. We need to go over there. We're gonna do this, and this. And he just treats it as like, okay, this is what I know now. He's not trying to fight the fact that it's a separate memory. He holds it in because he's like, well, they think they know what I'm talking about. If they knew it was a dead guy's memory in my own head, they would think I was nuts. But for now, this is gonna make the most of us survive. So we need to follow it this way.
Yeah. Someone attacks the tower with Saidin. Rand can tell. I had a moment where I was like, could this have possibly been Rand accidentally doing something? I don't think that's the case. I'm pretty sure it's Samael or an agent of Samael.
Yeah, I think he says he's able to see the traces of the power, and it like leads off to the west and to the south, I think, or something like that. So he was like, all right, so maybe it wasn't Asmodean, but Asmodean's still an asshole. So, it wasn't my first thought, but it doesn't change how I think about him.
Well, that's fair enough, but so the tower goes down. Well, at least one of the legs, or maybe two, are compromised. The thing falls over with Rand, Avienda, and Egwene on top. Rand manages to like grab the girls while simultaneously grabbing one of the posts of this thing, but they just ride it down. So I don't know how much help that actually did, because they all get slammed into the ground eventually.
Yeah, I was kind of impressed that it's like he's able to it's a superhero moment. He comes in, he scoops up Avienda and Egwene with one arm and manages to wrap his other arm around a stanchion, like, as the tower is falling.
He's a huge dude. But yeah, my point is, no matter how huge a dude you are, if you're holding two fully grown humans, even if they're both small, which Avienda is, and Egwene might be kind of a smaller human, but still, he's holding what, 200-300, maybe more pounds in one arm, while holding all of their weight, so a little bit more than that, 400 or 500. Once that thing tips to the side,
he's going over.
No one can.
Yeah,
hold
no,
that
he's
weight
going
with
over.
one arm. They're all going over. It was a good try. Maybe slowed them down a bit, but they're still all slamming into the ground at some point. And then we only see Rand wakes up.
Right.
We see like the second half of Avienda's sentence, and there's something moving on his face. And she says, "You have taken away what we are, what we were. You must give us something in return, something to be. We need you," because she's not sure if he's going to die or not. He just fell a long height. The moving thing slowed, touched more softly, which, by the way, I imagine is Avienda's hand on his face. "I need you. Not for myself, you will understand. For Elaine." Adorable. Okay. What is between her and me now is between her and me. But I will hand you to her. I will. If you die, I will carry your corpse to her. If you die... His eyes popped open. I'll just leave it
I think
there,
she was about to say, if you die, I'm going to kill you myself.
Yeah. I will pick you up by the hair, and I will drag you. I have returned him, Elaine. It's not exactly what we talked about, but...
And I actually had a question in the next paragraph. He wakes up and he says, "I have no intention of dying," which is sort of a badass thing to say when you've survived a fallen tower. And you're just like, "I don't intend to die," So when the show airs, it's going to be something super dramatic, and he'll probably pop an eye open, and have some snarky smirk on his face, and be like, "I don't intend to die." But then it says,
that was never in the plan.
Then a couple lines down, it says, "It was pure luck that Saidin had not scoured his mind blank in that last instant. Just thinking of seizing the source again made him groan." I wasn't sure. Does that mean, like, if he had not handled it correctly, he would just be like a vegetable because the power would have, like, backfired into him?
I had the same thought while I was reading that. And I would think that because Rand is holding so much of Saidin, and then he was, distracted and confused and hit so hard that he didn't know what he was doing for at least a moment or maybe even a full minute. I'm not sure how long he's knocked out for, and neither is he. I would think that if you're holding a ton of the power and someone punches you in the face super hard at the same time, enough to knock you out, you're still holding all of that in what I think of, oh gosh, and I don't know if I've ever talked about this out loud, but what I think of as a reserve. So first you have to open yourself to the power, you draw the power, you hold the power, and then you can wield the power to do various things. But while you're holding it, it's as if you are, I don't know that I can think of a good analogy, but it's almost like holding, like if you could fire a bullet and then point the gun.
Right.
and decide where it's going to go. You're holding a charged weapon that's ready to fire at any time. If you knock that thing around, who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What if someone drops it? It could just go off in a random direction. And I think that's what kind of what Rand's thinking. Like, if you're holding a ton of the power and about to strike and you get knocked out, maybe it just goes to the sky, maybe it goes to the ground, maybe it goes into your own forces, you know? Or into yourself, I should say, as well.
Right, yeah, it doesn't go outward, it goes inward. When I was playing Magic the Gathering, one of the early mechanics in the early editions of Magic the Gathering was called Mana Burn. Essentially, and that's sort of how I thought about the mechanics of it. So in Magic the Gathering, you've got all your...
They don't do Mana Burn
They don't
anymore?
do Mana Burn anymore.
It's been a long time since I played MTG.
I just got back into it. My girlfriend and I just got back into it and spent way too much on frickin' cards. I think of it kind of like Mana Burn. Like he taps the power, he's got his mana pool, he's got his reserve of power to use, and if he gets punched in the face, he doesn't use it for his turn, in heavy quotations, and all of that mana burn essentially goes inward, because it doesn't explode. If he had that much power holding and it went external, he would basically just become a human nuke, and that doesn't happen. So obviously I consider it more like the mana burn is sort of the way I headcanon it, I guess. Just where does it go once you release it? I think it has to go somewhere. The whole energy created doesn't, you can't destroy energy, it just goes somewhere else. I didn't think about the burning him out part, but I definitely thought of it more like the mana burn.
Is it called the theory of preservation or something like that?
Something like that's for smart people. I don't know the official terms for those things.
That energy can only disperse. You can't kill it. You can change it into something. You can make energy do a thing, but it
can change but not be destroyed or created.
If you're just holding energy, right, it can't be destroyed or created. Conservation
of energy. Thank you.
Is Arthur saying something? Ashamen routinely hold power and are knocked out during training. I think that is a possibility. Can we think of that, a good example of that? Or that at least they're channel until they're done with their task, and if they're fall over from exhaustion or whatever beforehand, and it doesn't seem to be a problem in those situations. Also, I should mention, Rand doesn't know this stuff at this point. He doesn't have all that experience. He doesn't understand these things. So he may just be afraid of something that's not real. That's totally possible, too.
Again, unreliable narrators, we don't know. We don't have enough male channeler POVs to sort of get a baseline.
Yeah. The only other thing I can think of at this point that we could talk about is at Asmodean, who's also not a reliable person. We don't really understand his motives, although I personally trust him. I think that he strongly believes he has nowhere to go. He's nowhere to run. But anyway, as Asmodean says when Rand wakes up later after the battle, Asmodean says, channeling in an exhausted state like that, like using as much power as you did, that can burn a man out, or at least so I've heard, because he's supposed to pretend like he's not a channeler. I want to say that there is a danger, but it's probably not as bad as what Rand thinks.
Well, he's also exhausted and not thinking clearly, so his mind could immediately leap to the worst case scenario.
That is also true. I've got to double check, but it's either Avienda or Egwene talking to him. Probably Avienda, just based on what I have highlighted here. Basically, they say, Rand starts talking about Samael. He's blaming Samael for this attack, killing a bunch of the maidens, his personal guard, but also women, which drives Rand absolutely insane. We have to accept that as sexist and, questionable and weird as it is. They're warriors. They're there to die, just like the men. He shouldn't be questioning whether or not they should be able to do their job.
They're actually way more effective at it than a lot of the men are. So
this is Egwene saying it, because it begins with, "Do not be a complete woolhead," Egwene said. Giving a start at his glare, but not letting go. She had redone the brown scarf around her head, but combing with her fingers had not put her hair back in order, and dust still covered her blouse and skirt. Whoever did this, why do you think they waited so long? Until you must be tired. Because if he missed killing you, and you went after him, you would be easy meat. You can barely stand on your own. And then Avienda grabs his other arm. So yeah, it was Egwene yelling at him. Could have been either.
Very fair, but she has a good point. Yeah, absolutely. They see it for the trap because while they are tired, they've also been trading shifts. So they're not as tired as he is, and so they're able to think more clearly, like, hey, this is pretty obviously someone standing in front of the bull with a red flag going, come get me.
Who, if I had to lead the Shido in this attack, and this big stand came up a few miles away from where we knew our enemies were, the very first thing I would do is destroy it.
Totally.
That would be the first thing I would do. I do not want someone raining down hellfire on my forces while they're trying to do what they need to do or move into position or whatever. I would absolutely not.
Right.
No. But that's not the point. That's not why whoever waited, whoever it was, probably Samael. But it could be any of the other 4 who are currently conspiring against Rand. Lanfear, Samael. It's not Lanfear. But it could be Samael, Graendal, or Robbie.
There are a number
because they're all working together on this plan.
There are a number of potential suspects.
Whoever did the attack, it's not even particularly important. It could be a random dreadlord. Was instructed to or decided to wait until Rand was tired, so to enrage him so that he would come after them while he was exhausted. Wiped.
Exactly.
So Rand gets up. Everybody's bleeding, including himself, but also the ladies. But it doesn't seem like they got knocked out as hard for whatever reason. And as they're standing up and like looking at their wounded, a runner comes to Rand. A young Aielman came running up through the maidens, Shufa around his shoulders, spears and buckler swinging easily. If he thought it odd to find 2 women holding Rand between them, because Egwene is on one side holding an arm and Avienda is on the other side holding an arm because they're worried that he's going to go charging off now to attack the person that hurt his people. If he's worried about, or if he thought it odd to find 2 women holding Rand between them, he gave no hint of it. He eyed the shattered remnants of the tower, and the dead and wounded, with a slight curiosity, as though wondering how it might have happened, and where the enemy dead might be. Grounding his spear points in front of Rand, he said, I am Siren, of the Ch44 sept of the Tomanel. I see you, Siren, Rand replied just as formally, not easy with a pair of women holding him as if they thought he might run. Han of the Tomanel sends word to the Karakarn. The clans to the east are moving toward each other, all 4. Han means to join with Derek, and he has sent to Aram to join them. Rand drew a measured breath, and he hoped the women thought his grimace was for the news. His side burned, and he could feel blood seeping slowly down his shirt. Rand has just heard word for the first time that the 4 undeclared clans are moving. They've moved together, but nobody knows what's going to happen after that.
All he knows is that they're moving, and so the people he calls out, so Han is of the Tomanel, Derek is of the Rain, and Aram is of the Sharim. So basically, those forces that he had in reserve are going to have to maneuver now because this unknown, unaligned force is coming down. And so part of Rand's battle plan is now kind of going out the window. There's no one to really sort of continue the poke into the Shido to get them to continue north outside of Cairhien. They're having to adjust to the actual battle that's going on and fold back.
Those forces are moving, but they're as of yet undeclared, so they could be moving against Rand's forces, who are now full of wounded and things. They can't take a full attack against their flank right now.
And he does mention that even if they were to come against him, all 3 of those clans would still be overwhelmed, but it would provide a buffer for a little bit. But they would still probably end up breaking through. So it's not a great bit of news when you don't know what this other force, this very large, fresh force coming into the late stage of a major battle is doing.
That's a good point that John is making, guys, that this force is absolutely fresh and Rand's forces are not. They've been busy. The Shido have been busy. Rand's forces have been busy. And even the ones he's held in reserve are... Rand's only fresh forces that he has are waiting to slow down a potential attack. So this is probably a suicide mission. I mean, if those 4 clans are going to join together and move and attack Rand, he's basically screwed. There may be some survivors.
And the other thing you have to think about too
if he's lucky.
is the terrain around Cairhien sucks. It's rocky and it's hilly, so all of these forces, it's not a classic medieval battle where you have lines of infantry charging at each other. You've basically got 2 hordes that have broken into, like it was saying, small group, 1,000 here, 500 here, 3,000 there, and they're fighting. Granted, they're not really wearing much in the way of heavy armor, but you're bolting up and down hills. You're running all, hither and thither and thon. So they've got to be physically exhausted, and they're facing the wrong way. They're fighting the forces in front of them, whereas this other force is potentially coming into their flank, and they're probably at a trot. They haven't been fighting. They've just been sitting watching, and now they're just maneuvering. And even by just maneuvering, even if they don't, at this point, because we don't know what their alignment is, even if they don't engage either side, just by maneuvering and having Rand have to counteract with his own forces, this could cost Rand the battle. They don't have to kill a single one of his troops, and he could potentially lose the battle.
That's a good point as well. Yeah, it would have been tight to begin with. I think Rand's tower was turning the battle. Now Rand's tower is no more at all. Rand says, tell Han to do what he must to keep them off our backs, which was his orders from the beginning.
Right. I like how the messenger kind of raises an eyebrow, like, duh? Like, no, we're just going to stand there and let them walk by us. Like, well, I mean, A, he's exhausted, but also B, Rand is inexperienced at this, and so he thinks he's giving a correct order, and that, again, falls into leadership. If you have leaders who know what they're doing, they don't necessarily need to have consistent micromanaged orders from up on high.
You have to know your people, too, and know what they know.
Exactly. And I'm sure those 3 clan chiefs are like, all right, so we're potentially about to die, but let the Karakarn know that some shit's about to go down, and then we're going to do our jobs. And, yeah, so it was a very redundant order.
So if you could send help or something, let them know, but otherwise we'll do what we agreed on. And Rand's orders are, do what we agreed on.
He's like, duh.
And it's just kind of like, that's it? That's it?
I'm missing the fight, you asshole. Really? You're just going to tell me the same thing that I already knew?
And, of course, Rand immediately says, I need someone to go fetch Jayadin. He wants to now move down toward Cairhien, the city itself. In theory, go looking after this channeler. I assume that's his intent.
He says he doesn't want to go after Samael, but he needs to get closer to the city because he can't see now. And if he's going to aid the battle at all, he needs to be closer to the city where he can see. And he needs to be closer to the city where he can actually do some good to protect the city. The battles out in the exterior of the city are important, but they're not as important as making sure the Shido don't get into Cairhien.
Yes.
The next thing I have is just how he was like, okay, I'm going to need a bunch of people to go with me, but make sure they're not injured. And he starts to say something to Sulin, who's got a big bloody bandage on her head. And she looks at him and she goes, I'm not one of the injured. And he's like, okay, you're not one of the injured. Let's go. Let's just do this. I don't have time to frickin' argue. Let's just go.
But yes, I really liked that. It's like, okay, Sulin, you're not injured, but make absolutely certain that none of the people you bring with you are actually freaking injured. And she nods quickly because she clearly is. Right.
She's got a bloody bandage on her head, and he's like, I'm gonna pretend that I don't see that, but if anybody else comes, it's your ass. So.
She nodded so quickly that he was convinced she would make any maiden with as much as a scratch remain behind, except herself, of course. Sulin is a great warrior. I like her a lot, even though we don't get a ton. I think at 0 POVs, but we don't get a ton out of her. But I don't know. I just really like her. She just seems like the meanest, toughest grandma that anyone ever met. This is kind of how I see her.
Yep.
50s, like I see her as an older woman. She appears to be, and we don't get ranks among the Aiel. There's not a lot of them, at least. But Bambi says there's one Sulin POV. So I guess I just wanted to make the point that I see Sulin very much as more like a general or at least a very high-ranking person. She may be there where things are happening, but the Aiel tend to be, like, even clan chiefs are there at a battle. I see Sulin very much like, I don't know. But John, you would know. What might be a modern equivalent to call Sulin? She's not a general. She's not sitting in an office.
She's not a general. She is a highly ranked non-commissioned officer. She is an enlisted. She is the one who has the knowledge. And actually, I bring this point up, and I'll bring it up again later on. But the way the military works is, so if you're in a standard company environment, like when my Army Reserve, I am in a company formation. There's about 160 of us. We are led by a captain. A captain is a relatively inexperienced officer. They've only been in for a few years, but they are paired with a first sergeant. First sergeants are an E8 in the military. They've had 15 plus years of experience, and they are the old, grizzled, enlisted person who's basically there to be like, okay, no, you little officer, like that's cute that you think that, but this is how it's actually done, and this is actually what we're going to do. And it's generally expected that the captain will be like, okay, because they want to listen to the grizzled sergeant who's had the actual experience. But she's definitely a high-ranking enlisted who's not necessarily put in charge all the time, but people look to her for the nod or the wink or the shaking of the head because she knows what she's talking about.
Yeah. She seems highly experienced. She seems much older than the young warriors. And she clearly appears to be a leader. She's the one that directly reports to the Karakarn himself and coordinates with the clan chiefs, whatever her movements are going to be. So she seems like, gosh, well, maybe more like a ranking member of the Secret Service at this point, because the maidens have become the guard of the dragon. So
something like that, yeah. She's definitely nobody to screw
something
with.
like that.
You don't want to screw with Sulin.
Yeah. That's why she's like bleeding out of the side of her head, and she's like, I'm not injured. And Rand's like, fine, but don't bring anyone that's actually injured with you.
Right, exactly. He's like, all right, I got it.
Rand makes the point to Sulin that everyone that comes with me needs to be keeping up with a horse. No one can be left behind. I have no time. So don't bring anyone who's too injured to move as fast as they possibly can. And so he makes the point really hard.
Right. And of course, in Sulin's mind, even though she's injured, she can still keep up with the horse. She's like, I got this. Like, even injured, I'm at 75% and I'm still over 100% of some of these people, but we've got this.
But I really felt when I read that was Rand saying, like, so really think about what you're about to do, because I will leave you behind, is kind of what he's saying.
Right, exactly. And then I just had a note about people bringing water bags and bandages and things, because you would be surprised how quickly you get dehydrated in a fight, and especially in a physical fight like this is going to be. You want to make sure that the wounded are hydrated, you want to bandage the wounds, and it's just part of general wound care that we all learn. But you go through water like it's nothing, and even if it's, in our case, I had a camelback on my back, and it's a rubber camelback, it's 110 outside, the water's probably 75, 80 degrees, it's the best thing on the planet when you're sitting there after a fight, and you're sucking down that water. It's all you want.
I can only imagine. And I can't speak to any kind of real combat experience other than like just occasional, no real combat experience. But every time I have any kind of experience just sparring and doing little martial arts spars, and I'm talking about for like, if a sparring match lasted for 3 minutes, that was nuts. That anyone got that long without someone beating the other guy or gal. And I remember people that were training us really spending a lot of time trying to remind us that, like, you have to mentally relax yourself. Like, if you are not currently, like, have your arms wrapped around your opponent and are trying to tear them in some direction one way or the other or something, don't flex your muscles. Try to blink a little less. Control your breathing, because it's everybody's instinct when you know someone may attack you at any time and you have to defend against it, or you're looking for you're in for an attack, your muscles will start to tense and flex and your heart rate rises and you stop having the kind of slow, calm, plodding thoughts that we normally do, or I normally do, where I can kind of think about what my next things are going to be. My next things are going to be. Everything's in the moment, everything, and it gets super tense. And like at any moment, you might get smacked right across your knuckles with a sharp piece of steel, or not a sharp piece of steel, but a blunt piece of steel. It doesn't feel any better, guys. Probably worse. But the point is, that's a whole part of training people to box or to fence, that you don't need to be like tensing all your muscles like that. And it tires you very fast. Even people who get really good at it, you can maybe do 3, 4. If someone has been training for a really long time, maybe a half a dozen matches in a row, and then most people say like, no, you need to sit down for an hour, because you're not going to show how good you are if you're fighting tired like that. And that's tired after 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
In the time of the Roman Empire, they had it down to a science. So even though you hear of these battles that would last like most of the day, the way they dealt with battle fatigue is so you're marching in line, and so say it's a century, say it's 100 men, and you're 10 by 10. The opponent is in front of you. What they would do is they would space themselves out, roughly arm's length, but far enough away that you were still covered by the shields of your buddies left and right, but you were sort of offset from the rank behind you. And the front line would fight for about 10 or 15 minutes, just slashing with swords, going over the top, going around the side, however you had to do. And then it was the centurion's job to sort of mark time, see how the front line was doing. And then they would have a signal. It was either a shouted command or generally a whistle or a horn, something that could pierce the din of battle. And what would happen would be the second line, which was offset, would march forward. The front line would sort of fold their shield back and fall back. They would fall to the very back of the line, where they could basically just stand there and rest and recuperate. And the fresh second line, which hadn't really done much fighting, was up at the front, and they would have their 10 or 15 minutes of hacking away. And then the third line would do the same thing. So you could fight, a unit, a century, could fight for over an hour, and you physically were probably only engaged 10 or 15 minutes of that. So that gives you the time to take the water, to bandage something up if you need to, and kind of get your brain ready again for when it comes time to be up at the front. And that's how the Roman legions were able to be such frickin' buzzsaws, is every couple of minutes they're replacing the worn-out, battle-weary troops with the fresh troops in a very specific way, that they were able to keep the best, most rested guys on the front fighting the barbarians who were just running at the shield.
That's in one group. The Romans were also notorious, in the early Iron Age phase. I mean, Roman history spans a long time, but because they were one of the very first militaries that always held a fresh reserve, which just stood there and watched. And if one group got too tired, so maybe they would have 3, 4, 5 groups, whatever, one group did nothing for a battle unless there was a problem, or if victory was ensured, then you move this new legion in and they can clean up. So you have a completely fresh group. So they would do this in layers and layers as well. The point that I was trying to make, when you're doing one-on-one combat, and I'm even, I wasn't doing deadly combat, just combat that could kind of hurt a little if you messed up really bad, you get tired after about 10, 15 minutes.
It's a lot of work.
15, maybe, yeah. Your mind's straining to find any in, out. You're afraid. No one wants to lose. And no one wants to get wrapped over the knuckles with a piece of ashwood.
Right.
Yeah, it's really tough. So you have to cycle these guys because you get tired fast. And if you're fighting for hours and hours, I mean...
Yeah, exactly.
I can't imagine what sort of mental state you would be in after that. So tired, you would be like in a dreamlike place. Tired and afraid and, yeah.
And almost like in the first level of shock, but not quite there, but just sort of physically there. And like Painted is saying in the Discord, that reserve unit was very often the most experienced, because if there was a problem, the experienced guys would sweep in and fix things, because morale is a huge part of these battles. So if you feel like you're losing and you're flagging and things aren't going well, and then all of a sudden the A team walks onto the field and is like, don't worry, we got this. And then all of a sudden you're like, all right, I guess we fucking got this. Let's go. And you're buoyed. And so that itself has an effect. But the reserve also had to respond quickly to whatever the command was. They may be stationed near the commander, and he might have to say, go right or go left really quickly. And they would have to be like, all right, and just respond and just know. And so they would be able to plug gaps or whatever the case is. The next thing I have down is just the next paragraph down, where it says Soralea was very definitely in charge, and my only note is, duh. When is she ever somewhere and not in charge?
But yes, so you're referring to, it's a group of wise ones that Rand is observing arriving at his tower after this big attack has happened, and there are probably, hundreds of wounded maidens and many dead as well. We don't ever see any numbers in this chapter. But Soralea arrives with a dozen wise ones under her and many, many more other people who are carrying water bags. Oh gosh, that's all it says here. But I was imagining water bags and clean bandages. So if you have clean water and clean bandages, you can get a lot done.
Absolutely.
Especially if you have boiling water. Save a bunch of these brave women who, I keep wanting to make the point, their job in this battle was to stand in place and make sure that tower couldn't be assaulted. When it was assaulted from the air, they take it bravely. They're okay with their job in this situation. I guess I just kind of wanted to point out how freaking brave that is. I don't have a good enough expletive. How MFing brave that is to just get shot from the sky and be like, yep.
That happened.
Yeah, that happens. It's all right.
Yeah, they handle it pretty well.
No one's mad. No one's upset. Everyone has us with a brave face. I mean, in particular, Sulin, who I don't think frowns or smiles ever. She just, everything she does with a brave face.
Gritting his teeth, Rand pulled himself into his own saddle in one smooth motion. And then the next paragraph down, Egwene kind of comes up close to him and says, if you cannot mount a horse any better than that, Rand al'Thor, maybe you should forget about riding at all for a while. And so it's obviously like, Rand thinks he's a badass jumping into his horse, and obviously he looks like he's struggling, and Egwene's calling him on it. And then I love this interaction because it plays back to them. I imagined Rand saying it.
Rand makes the same observation about everyone else.
Right. He's like, I saw you writing too. Like, don't you call me on the shit. Maybe you need to stick around. And she shuts up. And I very much imagine that's just like a one punch back and forth. Like, oh yeah, this. It's that sort of friend sibling relationship where she tries to call him on his shit. Yeah. And he's like, well, you're doing the same shit. Knock it off. And she's like, damn. Okay, you got me.
But basically, Egwene, I feel like the thread is kind of like, I saw you mounting your horse. You're so tired. You should probably just stay here with the healers and relax for a bit. And Rand's like, I saw you getting on your horse. Maybe I should let Soralea know that how tired you are, and you can hang back for a while. And then everybody is just quiet.
Right. It says Avienda gave Soralea another smile, and I almost picture it like one of those like showing my teeth, like, nope, nothing wrong here, nothing to see here. Please don't look over here. There's nothing wrong.
I had thoughts about that too while I was reading it. Just that Soralea is looking at them, watches them all mount and move. She knows they're exhausted. They get up on their horse, and the young ladies, both of them, at some point, Avienda a little after, but Egwene first, smiles at Sorelea and just shows her, and then Sorelea, I'm not going to bother trying to find it right now and hold everyone up, but Sorelea smiles back at some point, which is unusual for her, but I feel like Sorelea's kind of saying, "Oh, little sweethearts, are you too tired?" And the girls smile, mount, and ride off. And then Sorelea smiles. She's like, "Oh, not too tired to go murder a bunch of more."
I took it like that, but also kind of took it like she, her internal monologue was, "Oh, you're paying for this later. You don't know it yet, but boy, is it going to suck for you later."
Yeah. But also this Amis and Bear, they did a good job with these two so far. I feel like is kind of where Sorelea's head is, Like they toughened them up. These are strong young women. I can appreciate that, but I'm looking at the finer points here, and I'm thinking about how I can get them up to speed a little better. That's where I see Sorelea's mind.
And it was just in my head image. It's really funny to just imagine Avienda doing the don't situation under control. Everything's normal. Don't look at us. We're fine. We got this. Please don't call me back right now.
Just a large bruise on the face. NBD. Please relax. I think Avienda's the one that has a big bruise across the face.
I think so too. Yeah.
Got whacked with some of the lumber on the way down during the collapse.
But she still, I think it's mentioned a couple paragraphs ago, she still managed somewhere to find a comb where she was like, "Nope, I can't look. I'm going in to fight, but I gotta look somewhat normal."
Maybe you ought to stay here and help Sorelea until you feel better. Even if it did tighten her mouth sourly. Avienda gave Sorelea another smile. The old wise one was still watching. Rain dripped down from the brim of Matt's hat, and periodically he had to lower his looking glass and wipe off the end of the tube. The downpour had slackened in the last hour, but the sparse branches overhead gave no shelter at all. His coat was long since soaked, and Pips's ears were all down. The horse stood as if not intending to move, however Matt thumped his heels. He did not know for sure what time of day it was. Somewhere in the middle of the afternoon, he thought, but the dark clouds had not thinned along with the rain, and they hid the sun where he was. On the other hand, it felt very much like 3 or 4 days since he had ridden down to warn the Terrans. He was still not sure why he had done that. It was southward that he peered, and a way out that he looked for. A way out for 3,000 men. Easily that many survived yet, though they had no idea what he was up to. They believed he was hunting for another fight for them, but 3 so far were 3 too many by his book. He thought he could have escaped on his own now, so long as he kept his eyes open and his wits about him. 3,000 men, however, drew eyes whenever they moved, and they did not move quickly. What, with more than half of their number afoot? That was why he was on this light-forsaken hilltop, and why the Terrans and the Kyrianan were all jammed into the long, narrow hollow between this hill and the next. If he simply made a break for it... Jamming the looking-glass back to his eye, he glared south at sparsely wooded hills. Here and there were thickets, some fairly large, but most of the land was scrub and grass even here. He had worked back to the east, using every fold in the ground that would hide a mouse, bringing the column with him, out of the treeless terrain and into some proper cover, out of those bloody lightning strikes and fireballs. He was not sure whether it was worse when they came, or when the earth simply erupted into a roar for no apparent reason. All that effort, to find that the battle was shifting with him. He could not seem to get out of the center of the thing. Where's my bloody luck now that I really need it? He was a pea-brained fool for saying. Just because he had managed to keep the others alive this long did not mean he could keep it up. Soon or late, the dice would come up the Dark One's eyes. They're flaming soldiers, I should leave them to it and ride. But he kept searching, scanning the wooded peaks and ridges. They gave cover for Couladin Zail as well as for him, but here and there he could make them out. Not all were involved in pitched battles, but every last group was larger than his. Every one was between him and safety to the south, and he had no way to tell who it was until it might be too late. The Aiel themselves seemed to know at a glance, but that did him no good. Some mile or more off, a few hundred cadensaur-clad shapes running 8 abreast and heading east topped a rise, where half a dozen Leatherleaf made a poor excuse for a copse. Before the lead runners could start down the other side, a lightning bolt flashed down into their midst, splashing men and earth like a stone thrown into a pond. Pips did not even quiver as the clap reached Matt. The gelding had grown accustomed to closer strikes than that. Some of the fallen men picked themselves up, limping, and immediately joined those who had kept their feet in a hasty check of the unmoving. No more than a dozen were hauled across shoulders before they all dashed down from the height, back the way they had come. None paused to look at the crater. Matt had watched them learn that lesson. Waiting, only invited a second silvery lance from the clouds. In moments, they were out of sight, except for the dead. I like that little scene. It was a good intro to what Matt's looking at right now. He's basically trying to get a way to get these Kyrianans and Terrans out of the fight. He's trying to move them out and away, but he keeps being navigated back into the middle of it. You try to move away, there's a much larger force in your path. So you move a little to the south, and there's another larger force. So you turn back around, and you're heading back toward the center of the battle. And it's the only way he seems to be able to move, which, of course, is an effect of Matt's Tavera.
Yeah, he's asking where his bloody luck is, and his bloody luck is on, like, full power right now. He just doesn't realize
all
it.
Over. Yeah.
So just one quick thing that I wanted to, just sort of random trivia. The Band of the Red Hand, because obviously this is the core of the Red Hand that he is with right now, or what will become the Red Hand.
Right here now.
Robert Jordan got his inspiration for this group from a couple of different places. There is, in sort of Irish folklore mythology, there is something called the Red Branch. And the Red Branch was the guard of Ulster, of the King of Ulster back in medieval times, and their symbol is a red hand. And it was sort of a Heroes of the Horn type thing. It was supposed to have all of the great heroes of Celtic mythology in this large mounted cavalry force that used the Band of the Red Hand. So Jordan kind of split up that piece of mythology into two separate things, the Band of the Red Hand and the Heroes for the Horn. The band's sort of unofficial song, the Jack of the Shadows, is supposed to be sung to the tune of Gary Owen, which is the official song of the 7th Cavalry of the U.S. 7th Cavalry, which is also a cavalry formation. Most famously, it was Custer's at the Battle of Little Bighorn, or the Battle of the Greasy Grass, as the Lakota call it, and the Battle of the Iadrang Valley in Vietnam from the movie We Were Soldiers.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that? I'm actually curious. What is this formation that we're talking about? The formation that Matt's about to use with the...
No, just the in the military term, the term formation is the unit. So like the core of what will become the Red Hand is sort of based off of a couple of things, both fictional and real, that he sort of blended together, which was kind of his hallmark. So they are sort of based on a mythological Irish formation while using a song based off of an actual military unit from the U.S. Cavalry. The word formation can have multiple things in the military. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. Well, when I hear formation, and like I say, I enjoy very much reading about history and listening to history podcasts and things, but that is the extent of my knowledge of warfare and things, so... All I know is from what I've read in books.
It's sort of a colloquialism. When we say a military formation, like a unit formation, we all have to stand in formation as a unit. When it's a thing, right? Where one arm's length from the person in front of you.
It could kind of be a form that's aiding, like a formation, like something that is.
It's also come to mean the group of people who stand in that formation also, sort of doubles as the unit. So when I say military formation, I mean military unit. I just don't say military unit because I'm so used to saying formations. Famously, in the Battle of Waterloo, which was Napoleon's final defeat, the British formed cavalry squares, which was essentially squares of infantry facing outwards, because horses, unlike you see in a lot of fiction, will not directly charge at a large group of people pointing spiky things at them. So they would come in and break around the squares, and the squares provided 360 degrees of musket fire that they could pour on to the cavalry. And so, like, that would be a formation. But the formation also could refer to the unit of men who were in that box performing those maneuvers.
This reminds me of a sort of personal note that I would like to add to this episode, that Patrick is... I think that I have made my peace, but I have always been sort of afraid of horses because they're these giant... Well, I have absolutely no experience working with or training horses. But they're these giant, powerful animals that can run for miles. They can get a little bit nervous and kick just out of nervousness. They just do that, and that will send your heart for a mile through the back of your chest. These things are super powerful animals, but they're also unpredictable, and they're their own little things. They make decisions outside of what you can make them do, and that's terrifying. Well, Bambi, yes, I'm being much like Swan right now. Sometimes they just make their own decisions, and I don't like that. I also have no experience controlling them or any kind of training whatsoever, so they scare the ever-living crap out of me. But I do have a lot of experience training dogs. My dad owned a kennel when I was a little kid. I spent a lot of time working with lots of different dogs, doing training commands. I have a lot of experience and confidence dealing with any kind of dog. But the thing is, if the biggest, baddest, meanest dog jumps up at me and attacks me, I know that I can just give it my arm, and with the rest of my body, I can pin it. It can maybe chew your arm right off, but all you lose is an arm. If from the meanest dog that's trying to kill you, which never happens. I mean, eventually they'll just let go. Dogs aren't trying to eat you. They're not. They're just not.
That's fair. And I remember in grade school, I was pretty young, but the Budweiser wagon came to my hometown for like a photo op event, and I was not quite as tall as I am now, so I was probably 6 feet. Standing next to the Clydesdales, I felt like a mouse. Like, holy shit, those horses are ginormous.
It's terrifying. Someone could strap you to their back and slap their butt, and they'll run for like days or something. These things are pure power.
And these are war horses that the cavalry that Matt's with are war horses. These are massive. I mean, they are the medieval tanks. They are ginormous.
And mean animals. If you try to pull the reins out of their rider's hands, they will bite and kick you. You will die for trying to touch it. Because a bite or a kick from a horse is not like a bite or a kick from a human.
Very true.
It's not a mild inconvenience. You just lost most of your bicep or something. Like, it's, yeah, terrifying. But the point is that they're giant and they will make their own decisions.
They will indeed. They will make their own decisions.
It's also why I don't trust them. Horse might make a decision that you don't like, but you can't restrain it. I guess that's the real thing. I've worked with and trained pit bulls that are about the size of me as an adult man that I am now. So like 160 pounds, you know, standing on their hind legs, maybe 5 feet. They're thicker and shorter than a human would be even standing on their hind legs. But still, you kind of operate within their realm of respect. I think that horses respect you, but if they get nervous, you might die.
Right.
And it'll just be an accident. I don't know why I'm rambling on about this. It's because I'm afraid of horses.
It's totally fine.
That's why.
Also, I just wanted to point out one of the most guy thoughts that I remember reading in this book. A couple of paragraphs down from what you read, Matt's trying to think, okay, how the hell do I get out of this? How the hell do I get out of this? And then there was Melisandre to consider. He had never heard of a woman who would not take it askance when a man tried to walk out of her life without letting her know. He's also like, oh shit, there's this girl that I'm kind of with, but I'm trying to, like, leave, and if she finds me here, I'm going to have a problem because I sort of didn't tell her I was leaving. It's really hard to ghost somebody if you can't leave. And he doesn't want to get called on the carpet for it. Matt can't see the tower, and there's a big slope of trees that all of a sudden just erupts in flames, and he's like, okay, well, I mean, that's fine. But he thinks for a moment, like, is Rand finally going nuts? Is it someone on the other side channeling? He's like, I don't even know who the hell is channeling anymore. He's like, blood and bloody ashes, what has happened to my... And I think he's about to say luck. And then a branch cracks behind him, and he almost takes Estine's head off, just sort of without thinking about it. He just whips the Ashendare behind him and stops about an inch from slicing this guy's head clean off.
He hears the crack, gets nervous, and swings, and before he realizes it, he's about to cut off his own man's head.
Right.
This is where Matt comes up with a very clever plan. One of the most clever plans I've ever read about in any kind of literature, including the real world, where basically it seems... Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the way I'm imagining this scene. Matt's forces are arrayed not quite at the top of the hill, but below, slightly the top of the hill. And he's peering down, and he's watching these Aiel move toward his position. Or he's a little higher than them, at least, because he can observe them from further away than they can him. As they move forward, he has to decide what to do. At some point, he decides quickly that these are not Rand's Aiel. These aren't friends. So they're moving up toward his position, and the commanders underneath him tell him basically, we do not believe that they can see us or that they know that we're here. So they're walking right into your trap. Right, boss? Right? And Matt's like, yeah, uh-huh. Yeah, right into my trap. And everybody's like, oh, heck yeah. Then they're getting ready for the fight. Matt has no idea what he's doing. But he's deciding basically, here's what we're going to do. They're walking straight towards us. He has some archers, he has some pike, and he has some cavalry. And I see Matt's position right now. I don't know if this is specifically correct, but as on the peak of one hill, and there's a little dip in between him and the next high hill, and on either side it descends a lot longer. So Matt puts his pike into the valley at the high end. He places archers on either side of the hill from the pike, but slightly behind its position where it currently is. And he tells his cavalry, he splits them into two, and he tells them he wants them to charge at the right moment from the south and the north, whereas the archers are at the east and the west. No, I'm not exactly sure about the directions, John, but it's something along these lines. And he says basically, as they move up this valley in between these two hills, I want the pike to present to them, look at them. When they get a little close, yell and run away. Now, this is an ancient military tactic. That is so ancient that I think it's surely been happening before people were writing about it, because some of the very first writings that were ever done about military tactics, this was written about, where basically one force charges another force. That force screams, acts afraid, runs away. They run away back to a predetermined point. Then they turn around, face the enemy. And as the enemy is closing and deciding that, oh, we've backed them into a corner, they have no choice now, we're going to slaughter them, then the arrows start to fall. Then the pikes maybe break into two, and cavalry charges from both directions into the center and just crushes them. And maybe the pike never has to do anything other than just kind of defend itself. This is what Matt has done. I hope I described that well enough.
So the major points for this are they find out that it's Couladin's Aiel. And they're like, we're not sure, but there's somebody running around bare-armed with dragons on their arms, so we're 98% sure that it's Couladin.
Oh my god, John, I forgot I forgot the best part. I think he explains to the pike, and he's like, and when they get close enough, I want you to yell.
Exactly.
Like, get it together. Protect the dragon. Protect the dragon. But he's not there. He wants to draw them in. He wants them to think that this is their goal right here.
The point about the deliberate battle misinformation is fantastic, and it's been used. One of my favorite stories about disinformation used to great military effect is the Battle of Midway. December 7th, 1941 happens. Most of the U.S. Pacific Fleet is knocked out at Pearl Harbor. We have very little resources to use. However, the U.S. intelligence apparatus in Pearl Harbor had cracked the Japanese cipher code, so we could read their messages, but they were still vaguely coded. They would say things like "target X" and whatever. They wouldn't say anything outright, but we could read them in plain English. And we keep reading about target X, how this battle formation is heading for target X, carriers are heading to target X. And the leader of U.S. intelligence in Pearl Harbor asks for permission to play a trick, and he gets permission. He sends a courier slowly all the way out to Midway Island with a note. And they say, read this note in the clear. Don't code it, don't encrypt it. We want you to send a radio message in the open reading this note. The guy he's about to read it is like, but this is a lie. And they're like, we don't care, just read it. So they send a message.
Precisely.
Right. Well, they send so Midway sends a message that says, "Hey, we're almost out of fresh water. We need our desalinator is down. We need fresh water." And the Japanese code that U.S. intelligence in Pearl Harbor is able to break says target X is running out of fresh water, and they were like, "We got you." And so that's why the Battle of Midway happened the way it did, is because we knew they were coming before they were coming. So this whole trick is essentially, we know that Couladin is probably gunning right for Rand. He's going to bully his way through at any point. So the way to make him think he's there and slow down and not worry about getting past Matt's units is to do this whole protect the dragon thing. So he thinks he's found him, and he's going to put all of his efforts into this fight and not actually into looking for Rand, who's not actually there. And so everybody's moving east. And so he sends Talmanis from the south with the cavalry, and Nailseen, however you pronounce that guy's name, is going to come in from the north. And they're basically going to pincher the Aiel with the cavalry and hold with the pikes on the front end. And that allows the archers to hit from the sides and the cavalry to come in. Now, the cavalry's not just going to come in and stand there. That's not what they do. They're basically hit and run. They should be able to sweep in from the north and the south and do hit and run alongside, beat a couple of them up, and pull off and come back around. And that will distract them so that the pikes can move in. When you're thinking about pikes, these are, so the Aiel spears are very much like the Zulu assegai spears. They're probably 3 or 4 feet long. They're very much one-handed weapons that you can kind of dance around with and come at different angles with. A pike is anywhere from 10 to 25 feet long. It's a giant metal pole. It's a giant wood pole with a heavy metal bit at the end. And when he refers to push of pike here in a minute, and the push of pike is literally 2 giant military formations with bristling porcupine style with these giant spears walking at each other. In most of those cases, the injuries and the deaths didn't come from getting stuck with the pointy end. It came from the fact that you were pushing. The back ends didn't fight. They were literally there just to shove more people forward into this big sort of angry mosh pit of armor and pokey sticks. And so most of the casualties came from, like, getting crushed or passing out or getting trampled while you were in that huge crush of humanity, not actually from the pointy sticks until one side broke. When one side broke, then you're trying to run away with all of these giant pointy sticks poking you in the back. The early medieval arms races, whereas we're used to armed races where it's like we want to upgrade the armor. We're trying to get better range on our weapons. The arms races for the medieval times were, the Swiss have come up with a 12-foot pike. I guess the French need a 15-foot pike now. And they would just keep making these giant spears longer and longer and longer and longer, so you were engaging it further and further and further away.
This was a tactic that's been used. I mean, it's classic. The first example I can think of is Philip of Macedonia with 12-foot spears.
Exactly.
Gave a bunch of his infantry 12-foot spears, and he made that the center of his attack columns all the time because he wanted people to attack the pikemen. He wants or Philip of Macedonia, at least, the father of Alexander the Great, for those of you who don't know, wanted people to run toward his pikes. So you lead with that. You lead with the pike because it's next to impossible to take them down as a group with, Persian skirmishers and slingmen and things like that.
Right, and in this case, the pike's the pike. This is sort of the retelling, or technically it's the first use because New Spring hasn't been writ yet by this point, I don't think. But this is the hammer and the anvil. This is the pike is going to be here. We're going to hold them in place. The archers and the cavalry are going to do the real work until they break, and then the pike can come in and sweep up.
Heavy infantry.
Right. Matt also has zero time for this Tyrian Kyrianan bullshit, and he is really irritated that they keep trying to one-up each other and fall all over each other to offer him, their fealty, and my men will do it. No, my men will do it. And he's like, I don't fucking care who does it. Just get it frickin' done. This is, it annoys the living, I think he even talks about, I think at one point, Dayrid. He's like, Dayrid's better at this, but his house is of a lesser house than Talmanas or Estine. So they have to play by the stupid rules, and the guy with the actual potential experience has to give way to the people whose, daddy is in the right political office. And then I like this line. So he has the Dark One's own luck, does he? Blood and ashes, but I hope mine is back in. And it's like, it never left you, asshole. You're alive because of your luck.
And his goal is also that no one will reveal itself until the pike is beginning to retreat, or has retreated a ways, essentially. That he knows that as his pikemen retreat from the Shido advance of the basically like light infantry with short spears is essentially what they are. You could maybe also call them javelineers, as we might have said in ancient writings.
Or skirmishers or something along those lines, yeah.
Yeah, moving in toward this heavy infantry, which Matt has told to retreat. We want to basically engage a little, then turn around, run away. Run away, make them chase you, and then when you hit the wall at the end of this valley, because there's not really any way out, turn around and say, for the dragon, and start picking up that call, for the dragon. We must protect the dragon. And then turn around, face them, and as they're about to engage, the arrows will start raining. And shortly after that, the cavalry will crush in from either side of them, from both sides, which I always imagined was north and south. It could be east and west. We don't know precisely which way he's facing, I think.
All we know is that Couladin is heading east, and he wants the cavalry to come from north and south. So I guess I was assuming that the pike would be to the east.
Oh, he did say north and south. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for confirming that. I couldn't remember if I was just making it up, because that's the way
I might have drawn a battle plan on my notes. I have a lot of arrows pointing to different things and squares for formations.
Well, it's an excellent battle plan, and I mean...
And Devico, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but in the Discord is also right. If Couladin handles his emotions a bit like a rampaging teenager, if you say, the dragon's over here, he's going to go there because he's a dipshit, and he's heavily influenced by his emotions, and he's not going to think properly. He's going to think, oh, that's what I want. I'm angry. I'm going to go kill that thing. And it's going to be the wrong thing.
Right into the trap.
And a little bit further down, so Dayrid is the leader of the infantry, and he says, so you stay with the pikes this time. You must not let your anger at this Couladin overcome you. A battle is no place to try fighting a duel. Matt barely stopped from gaping. A duel? him with Couladin? And it's like, what? And it's like, well, we're about to find out in about 3 pages. Yes, a duel with you and Couladin.
I want a cry raised as soon as you stop the retreat. Protect the Lord Dragon. This time, Darad laughed aloud. That should bring in the Shido right enough, especially if Couladin was leading. Yeah, it's perfect. That's perfect.
Darad talks again for another minute, but it basically affirms the cavalry officer Talmanas and Nalcyan are super hot-headed, and they're there for the glory. They want to go in and fight. And Darad has seen some shit, and he's like, I'm just going to stand here and let them come to me. I don't need glory. I don't need excitement. I'm a soldier. I know what I'm doing. You should chill the fuck out and relax and not let your emotions overcome you. This is just a fight. And Matt's like, but I would never do such a thing.
You know, now that you say that, Matt is quite good at that. Matt is always considering his best plan of retreat, how to get out, and, you know, how to not take a spear through the brisket, which he says at this point, somewhere in the chapter. For reference, I don't know if it means anything or Matt wants it to mean something, but the brisket in a 4-legged animal it's the lowest point essentially between its 2 front legs. So it's like the lower chest on a 4-legged animal, but on a human, I would imagine the brisket's basically the lower stomach, crotch, or butt area.
Somewhere it's going to take forever to die, because gut wounds are painful.
It's a bad place to get stabbed. Even if it's in the butt.
Very much so. Further RJ foreshadowing when he says, bloody Couladin, I'd like to shove this spear down his throat. It's like, just give it a minute. 5 pages, dude. It'll happen in 5 pages.
So this is our final perspective switch for this chapter. 5 or 6 pages left. And we switch back to Rand, who is totally exhausted, confused. A lot of his... I didn't even want to do a read into this because Rand seems so confused in this that it seems like a disjointed, weird thing to read to people.
Yeah, he's just rambling.
And at some point here, I'll read this part. This is the second paragraph into Rand's POV, or at the end of this chapter, anyway. Was it twice Samael had attempted his life today? Or 3 times? More? It seemed that he should be able to remember how often someone had tried to kill him. No, not to kill, to bait. Are you still jealous of me, Tiljanan? When did I ever slight you, or give you 1 finger less than your due? Swaying, Rand scrubbed a hand through his hair. There had been something odd about that thought, but he could not recall what. Samael? No. He could deal with him no matter. Later. Today, Samael was only a distraction from what was important. He might even be gone. That's the second paragraph. It goes on like this, guys. He's exhausted. He's not thinking clearly anymore. This is how I think when I first wake up in the morning. What do I do at work? Is that?
He's like, not balefire, mustn't use that. Threatens the fabric of the pattern, but not even for Ilyana. I would burn the world and use my soul for tinder to hear her laugh again. And then he's like, what was that? What the hell? Like, it's just, yeah.
He was drifting again, away from what was important. He has the thought immediately after the discordant, weird thought about Ilyana.
And then he shoots a flare, essentially, up into the air and kind of looks around weirdly as everyone's covering their eyes. And he's like, oh, it's nighttime. They're trying to protect their night vision. Like, he just did it because he couldn't see. He wasn't taking in all of the information that it was nighttime and there were other people with him. He was just like, oh, can't see. Guess I need light.
Yeah. He can't see, so he feels frustrated, and so he sends out this huge flare into the sky, which... John, did you see 1917, the movie that came out recently about World War I?
I need to. I haven't yet.
Well, I felt it was wonderful, and it was a good depiction of World War I, which is something that's super rare. I really enjoyed it, but also there were some, like, these folks really did their research. They did a whole long scene that's like 10 minutes or something where... I know you're a bit of a history buff too, so you've probably read about they had these shells during World War One that would be fired basically straight into the air, and they made a huge bright light.
Yeah, star shells.
Oh, I didn't even know what they were called.
Yeah, star shells.
And essentially, for the benefit of everyone who isn't you, because you know what I'm talking about at this point, or anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, the shells would be fired up into the air. They made a giant bright light, and it would allow the soldiers on the ground to see for a very short period of time, a few seconds. So they would fire these things over and over. So you would see this, essentially, it was described as a flickering light. That it was as if you were in like a warehouse under very bright floodlights that had a little bit of water in them or something. Like they kind of work almost perfectly. So it's flickering.
It's very
shaking,
stroby
strange
almost, yeah.
light from the sky. Yeah, stroby, yeah, which is disorienting at best. So I'm not sure if it would maybe be better if you were just in the dark at that point. But this is what the idea was at the time. And there's at least one long scene in that movie that takes place over the night where these shells are going off. And it is terrifying just to look at. You can see how difficult it would be to understand what's happening around you. Anything other than like a few feet around you. You know, I can't imagine what it would be like to be getting shot out from far away with a strobe light in the middle of the night over terrain that you've never seen before. That's, you know, probably has giant craters in it. Jesus Christ. I don't know what else to say about that. But this is essentially what Rand's doing here. He's putting up this huge light so that he can see, but it does not help his soldiers. He figures it out quickly, but that made me think of that right away. This is actually worse.
Yeah, he's looking for, he's so tired, he's looking for Egwene and Avienda, and he's like, but I don't see them. Oh, I know, and he makes the big flare, and everyone's like, well, that doesn't help us. And he's like, he's still looking for them, and he's frustrated because he doesn't necessarily remember the last couple of hours, just because he's so drained that he doesn't realize that it's nighttime now, and that they're not there.
I actually didn't mark this, but I want to read a little bit because, I don't know, I just find this very compelling. Rand's saying, where are they? Where are they? And Sulin walks over to his horse, and she's looking up at him, and he says, where are they? He was vaguely irritated when he had to say who he meant, and just as vaguely aware that he had no reason for it. They went to Moraine Sedai and the Wise Ones at dusk, Karakarn, Sulin replied, moving closer to Jayadine. Her short white hair shone in the moonlight. No, her head was bandaged. How could he have forgotten? A good 2 hours gone. They know that flesh is not stone. Even the strongest legs can run only so far. Rand frowned. Legs? He had been riding Mist, which he hasn't. He's on Jayadine. I'm pretty sure. The woman was making no sense. I have to find him. They're with Moraine Sedai and the Wise Ones, Karakarn, she said slowly. He thought she was frowning, too, but it was hard to be sure. Not them, he muttered. Have to find my people. They're still out there, Sulin. Why was the stallion not moving? Can you hear them? Or out there, in the night, still fighting. I need to help them. I'll skip a bit, but Sulin replies, The Wise Ones must speak to you now, Rand al'Thor. Her voice had changed, but he was too weary to say how. Can't it wait? He says. I must find them, Sulin. Anyla seemed to spring up on the other side of the stallion's head. You have found your people, Rand al'Thor. The Wise Ones are waiting for you, Sulin added. And they turn him away and take him to the Wise Ones for this important message that they have to tell him, which is to go the fuck to sleep. You are now useless. You are useless on this battlefield. You need to get out. You need to leave.
He's trying to spur his horse, and he's like, why isn't it moving? And there's two Aiel holding the bridle, not letting the horse move, and he's not comprehending that. He's just like, but I'm spurring the horse. Why is it not moving?
And he just keeps saying, like, where are they? I need to find them. And they're like, Rand, we know where they are. They're not in the battle. They left. And Rand's like, but we have to go to the battle because they're probably there. And they're like,
it's
Rand,
over.
No, They walked away a long time ago. It's pretty much done.
Yeah, they're asking in the Discord why the horse isn't moving. It's said a couple of times. First, Sulin is holding, and then Nyla is also. They're both holding his horse's bridle so that it can't move, and he's just not seeing that because he's so tired and focused on everything else that's going on.
Jayadeen won't move because, its bridle is being held on two different sides, but on one side at least for at any point during this. And he's probably surrounded by people holding pointy things.
I imagine her voice kind of pitches down when she's like, oh, well, this is why. And he's like, but why is it like, I just answered that. Why are you asking me again? And then the concern kind of creeps in like, okay, something's wrong. We need to fix this.
And then she switches focus. And at some point she says, oh, Rand, the wise ones really need to talk to you, like right now. Rand's like, oh my gosh, can it wait? And they're like, no, we're so sorry. We're gonna bring you over there now, and you just have to have a little conversation, and then you can come right back. They know he's not going to come back from a conversation with the wise ones. They're just lying in the best possible way to say, well, they don't say the wise ones have requested to speak with you. They say the wise ones need to see you now, which is basically saying you're too tired, you're too sick and injured to continue. The wise ones need to see you because you're injured. They don't lie, but they mislead him purposely.
And he's like, whatever they want
to bet.
They had best be quick. And he does get led into the encampment, and he sees them sort of dealing with all the wounded. And then he gets surprised because he sees Asmodean helping with the wounded as well. And I like the line about part of the way down where he says, Moraine insisted I carry water. A forceful woman. It's like, Moraine was probably like, get your forsaken ass up off the ground and carry the water for the wounded who actually did some shit in this battle, or else.
Or we will speak of this later.
Exactly. And even a Forsaken's like, nah, I'm good. I don't want to deal with any of that. I'm good.
Oh, you know what I meant to ask you much earlier, John? Are you on paper or
I'm on ebook.
Only asking because if you were on a paperback, I could say I'm on page 713 and at the top, but that doesn't translate to audiobook.
Yeah, I liked this particular paragraph that you're about to read because he's just so tired, like he's just stream of consciousness talking, and it's not necessarily his consciousness because he comes out with some shit, and Asmodean's just like, even I don't know that shit. Like, where is this coming from? Because he calls Samael by his real name, and even Asmodean's like, I didn't know the guy's real name.
Yeah, and that's a good intro, because I would normally say this opens with Asmodean speaking. And so Rand is showing up from the battle. Asmodean has been helping carry water with the Gaishain, essentially to aiding the wounded. And Asmodean says, "What happened?" "Samael," Rand said, but not an answer. "He was just speaking the thoughts that drifted through the void. I remember when he was first named Destroyer of Hope, after he betrayed the gates of Havan, and carried the shadow down into the Rorn of Medoy and the heart of Satel. Hope did seem to die that day. Kulin Kuhan wept. What is wrong?" Asmodean's face had gone as white as Sulin's hair. He only shook his head mutely. Rand peered at the pavilion. Whoever was speaking now, he did not know her. "Is that where they are waiting for me? Then I should join them." "They will not welcome you yet," Lan said, appearing beside Asmodean, who jumped. "Or any man." Rand had not heard or seen the warder approach, but he only turned his head. Even that seemed an effort. It seemed to be someone else's head. "They meet with wise ones from Miagoma, Kadara, Shiand, and Dareen. The clans are coming to me," Rand said flatly, but they had waited long enough to make today bloodier. It never happened like that in the stories. "So it seems. But the four chiefs will not meet you until the wise ones have made their arrangements," Lan added dryly. "Come. Moraine can tell you more than I of it." Rand shook his head. "Done is done. I can hear details later. If Han doesn't need to keep them from our backs any longer, then I need him. Sulin, send a runner. Han, it is done, Rand, the warder said insistently. All of it. Only a few Shido remain south of the city. Thousands have been taken prisoner, and most of the rest are crossing the Galen. Word would have been sent to you an hour ago, had anyone known where you were. You've kept moving. Come, let Moraine tell you. Done? We've won? We have won. Completely. Rand peered at the men being bandaged. The patient lines, awaiting bandages, and those leaving with them. The rows that lay almost unmoving. Moraine was still making her way along those, pausing wearily here and there to heal. Only a few of the wounded would be here, of course. They would have been coming as they could throughout the day, leaving as and when they could, if they could. None of the dead would be here. Only a battle lost is sadder than a battle won. He seemed to remember saying that before, long ago. Perhaps he had read it. No, there were too many living in his responsibility for him to worry over the dead. But how many faces will I know? Like Julian's. I will never forget Ileana. Not if all the world burns. Frowning, he raised a hand to his head. Those thoughts had seemed to come on top of one another, from different places. He was so tired he could hardly think, but he needed to. Needed thoughts that did not slide by almost beyond his reach. He released the source and the void, and convulsed as Sidene almost drove him under. In that moment of retreat, he barely had time to realize his mistake. With the power gone, exhaustion and pain crashed down on him. He is aware of faces turned up to him as he toppled from his saddle, mouths moving, hands reaching to grab him, cushion his fall. "Moraine!" Land shouted, voice hollow in Rand's ears. "He is bleeding badly!" Sulin had his head cradled in his arms. "Hold on, Rand al'Thor," she said urgently. "Hold on!" Asmodean said nothing, but his face was bleak, and Rand felt a trickle of Sidene flowing into him. From the man, darkness came.
He's probably been bleeding this entire bloody time, but he had the void, so he didn't feel it. And so blood loss comes in, and he's just like, oh, nope, I'm out.
There is a line or two about it that Rand begins bleeding before the tower falls, from the wound in his side at the very least. But then he falls off a goddamn tower that falls over. So there's, small head injury, maybe a big head injury, plus he's exhausted, plus he's been bleeding all afternoon from somewhere in his torso. Not safe, ever. Yeah, it's amazing he's still standing.
Totally. The only note that I had is, I don't remember where we get the number, but eventually we find out that 20,000 Shido got taken Gaishine in the battle.
Do we know how many dead?
I looked and I never saw anything. But I tried to find numbers. But, I mean, you had literally almost 1 million combatants. So tens of thousands of dead would be totally within the realm of reason.
Metal Jatura, I kind of wanted to respond to what she was writing here. Our friend from Atlanta. Asmodean's bad at healing. I feel like this chapter ended with that kind of open-ended thing where Asmodean is putting flows into him and Rand knows it but passes out. It's meant to kind of make you question and stuff, but Asmodean is trying to do what he can. We also know that Asmodean is a terrible healer. So is Rand. I believe Avienda sucks as well. Egwene's no good at that particular skill.
There's when the tower falls, there's a scene with Egwene muttering angrily to herself as she's basically putting a bandage on her face, and it's because she can't heal. And I forgot to read that particular note, but it was basically like she doesn't like to feel useless, and she can't heal, so she has to use regular pedestrian methods for bandaging and taking care of things when she would much rather be able to heal. But yeah, she can't do crap about it.
Egwene, especially in the late books, has a ton of skill with a lot of different things. None of those is healing. Avienda isn't, Rand isn't, Asmodean is possibly the worst out of all of them. But Asmodean, I strongly believe, is trying to do whatever he can to help Rand, which, like Zartha's bringing up, is probably limited to something like what Elaine is limited to, healing bruises and cuts and doing some surface things. He could maybe stabilize him so that he doesn't die and bleed out, but he's not gonna.
He's not curing him at all.
Not
No,
even.
and he know
Yeah.
it's meant to be that upended. Like, is he healing him or is he not? He's totally healing him. Asmodean knows that if Rand goes down, he is screwed. Like with a capital S. Like forever tortured by the Dark One and the Forsakens for the next 8 ages, kinds of things. He is doing what little he can because he feels like he has to do something, but he wouldn't. At this point, he can't screw Rand over. He is so totally tied to Rand that anything else would be dumb on his part.
Oh, yes. That's the point that I wanted to make before. I strongly believe that Asmodean would never betray Rand. I mean, he would have to be... I don't think that he ever would betray Rand.
He likes himself too much living.
Asmodean is stuck. He is the man that Asmodean tells a story about, where he is basically tells a story about how he was once fighting a man or something. But the story begins when a man is falling off a cliff, and his hands are slowly dragging, and he grabs onto a little tuft of grass that's sticking out from the stone, and he tries to pull himself up by it. And then he falls, of course, because he trusted his whole body weight to a tuft of grass. Now, why did he do that? And that's the point of Asmodean's story.
Right.
That when you're in a desperate situation, you will grasp onto anything. No matter how hopeless you think it is, it doesn't matter. If it will save you one more second, you will do it. That's what Asmodean's saying when he gives that story to Rand. He's saying, I know that I'm basically dead already. I know that you're going to lose this war, which he's wrong about, obviously. And I know all of these things about this. But here I am, stuck with you. There's nowhere that I can go, so I will grab onto that tuft of grass. I'll die, painfully and horribly, but I'll try.
Right.
That's what he's saying when he tells that story, which I always thought was very powerful, very... the most important thing you can know about Asmodean is to read that quote.
Oh, yes, totally. He will live for as many seconds as he can, however he can.
He just thinks that it's ultimately hopeless. He just thinks that he's buying himself a second at a time, and we'll see how long it goes for. And until then, well, you do what you can. As far as my life goes, just kind of regular, generally busy. I had a really nice day on Friday, though. I felt it was one of those productive days where I was like, yeah, I'm an adult. Yeah, I can get stuff done,
And that lasted for all 30 minutes before then you were like, oh, yeah, that's right.
Right, then I ran errands for half a day, and I was like, I deserve a beer. Kept it to one lunch beer. Had a couple of hot dogs at this bar. It was kind of like right up the street from where I live. Maybe some of you guys don't know this about me, but I love garbage food as one of my favorite things. I try to limit it as much as possible, but I love like hot dogs and chicken nuggets and highly processed food. It's so delicious.
For me, it was a survival tactic. Every time I was deployed, they would serve us. There were usually 2 chow lines at the chow hall, and you either had the chow line that was trying to do like the actual sit down, like quote unquote real adult dinner, or it would be like cold cuts or pizza or chicken nuggets and French fries, and that was always like, no, that I know that I can eat those chicken nuggets and it'll be fine. I don't know whatever this is over here, but I don't want my stomach to come in contact with that because I don't know what it's going to do to me. Chicken nuggets are safe. Chicken nuggets and hamburgers.
Heck yeah. They have been so processed and rendered, and there's nothing in there that hasn't been, like, calculated and measured.
Right. It is so, like, nutritionally zero that you're like, all right, this is fine.
Oh, I hear you, Megs. I don't know if I mentioned it on the podcast, but a couple of weeks ago I got the flu really good. Oh, I probably did, because I got it right after Seth got it, so I think I was just going around town. All I ate was top ramen. But we did have good actual bone broth that I made it in. So well, to be honest, Julia made it for those 2 days that I had a fever. I basically didn't get out of bed. Probably would have just laid there and drank water if I still lived alone.
I don't get sick very often, but when I do, I claim the right of every man to whine like a baby and say that I'm on death's door.
I feel like, I don't know, I'm not really like that, but I'm more of like which I feel like is probably equally obnoxious. I'm like, no, just leave me. Like, don't
come in here. I'm dying. Just let me die in peace.
Yeah. Just put my sword in my hands after my eyes stop moving. Yeah, I hadn't gotten sick like that for like 10 years probably. I had like enough of a fever that I just stared at a wall and thought like I could, throw on some Star Trek on my laptop or something. Nah. I didn't want to move.
It generally has to be pretty intense for me to to claim that I'm sick. Between the military giving me cures for diseases that I've never even heard of and being subjected to dead people on a regular basis, my immune system is pretty good. So if it gets through all of that, then I will claim that I'm dying.
Me too. It took me right out. And at one point, because Julia knows how I am when I'm not feeling well, she took my temperature like every couple of hours those few days and was like, at one point it got up to 102 and she was like, if this gets up to 103, I'm bringing you to the hospital and you can't resist me when you have a fever of 103. We'll drag you down the stairs. All right. Can't afford that, but fine.
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion. Healthcare system in America is a cesspool of a discussion that probably should be best avoided on a nerdy podcast.
Yeah. If you've listened long enough, you probably know how we feel, but we should just leave that there.
You live in the Pacific Northwest, and you've been doing this for a couple of years. There have been inklings of political leanings. It's fine. It's your podcast.
We fit in,
but
yes.
It's just you're not standing out in any way, shape, or form to what people consider the standard West Pacific Northwest leanings.
No, we're real obvious. I'm trying to think if there's any other...
Plaid and Subarus.
Yeah, gosh. I wear the Plaid and Seth owned the Subaru.
I was so surprised. Just walking around downtown for all the events at SpoilerCon, I was like, there are so many goddamn Subarus in this town. It really is a thing.
People love them. I mean, it's a great make of car, but I'm sure someone's competing, right? I don't actually know. I've been living in cities long enough that I stopped owning a car, or haven't had to commute. If that had come up, if I had to have a car to make money, to pay rent, to have a place to live, which is everywhere else that I've lived, I've had to do that. When I first moved out here, I told myself, well, I should probably buy a car soon, but we'll see how long I can get by without it. I'll try to stash some money, and that was in 2012. I said that to myself.
Well, there you go. It's working out for you.
Yeah, well, so far. We'll see.
It's very difficult to get around up here. I mean, it's not difficult, it's just expensive. You'd have to the cost of living is so high up in my area that you would have to have several jobs to be able to afford a place where you could commute easily to a job where it would pay you enough to do that sort of thing. Yeah.
I'm, I think, blessed to live in a city that's big enough that it has public transit and most things are walkable, but also it's small enough that you can get from one end to the other in a lift and it won't ruin your wallet.
Right.
$15 from like one end to the other. Not
Recently,
so bad.
They put out a study. So there's a city up nearby me called Everett, Washington. Everett, Washington to Seattle downtown should take you 20 or 30 minutes at most. That's just how that stretch of I-5 is that length. However, in the morning commute, it can take up to 2.5 hours. So it is considered some of the worst traffic in the country just because of the length of commute versus time sitting in car of commute. Yeah, it's pretty crappy. Luckily, my schedule is weird. I work noon to midnight. So by the time I go in, I've avoided the rush on both ends. I usually get paid to sit in rush hour traffic on the way to calls.
Hey, that's nice. When I lived in Jersey, I had a similar kind of shift that it started, well, it was even later. It started like around rush hour. I think it was like 5 till 3 a.m. or something like that. Which is because I was a union worker and just the way it worked and stuff. When you're young, you get the crappy shifts that nobody wants. So you work like, from dinner time till like just before dawn. But if you stay long enough, you can get those decent shifts. But I used to love that because I would always be driving against traffic.
Right.
I'll be driving to work while most people were leaving. So, it was very satisfying to see all the traffic on the other side. As I zipped on by, Hung out with Seth the other night, just for an hour or two, and was telling him this. I had this interesting thing happen to me at work. Most of you guys know I'm a bartender, and I pretty much only work brunch unless my manager's absolutely desperate, and then I'll work some dinner shifts. I don't really like closing the bar anymore. I just feel like I'm too old for it. I don't want to be awake till 2. Or I don't want to be at work until 2.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But in any case, there's this guy that's been coming in as long as I've been there. He comes in like pretty much every Saturday morning, sometimes with his wife, sometimes without. And he orders breakfast, and we chat. We both have enjoyed some backpacking in the past, so we'll talk about that and stuff. The other day, I forget how this came up. I forget how it came up exactly. But basically, long story short, the dude owns a small IT company that works with other small businesses, basically providing services, particularly emergency services, but they have a bunch of different packages they sell. And I was chatting with him about it, and it sounded like it was a really nice company that he built with a business partner. And then he was basically like, gave me his phone number, and he was like, we have some lower level positions, because I told him, I was like, I don't really have real technical experience, but I've thought about trying to get into the industry just as a young 30-something if I was looking to do a career change. And he gave me his number, and he was like, we have some open positions, and gave me his number, and he was just like, all right, see ya. It made me, I've been thinking for like the last 2 weeks, like, should I call this guy? Should I change my career? What if I have to quit my job? It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about it.
And that's great. I'm sort of getting into that point too. I've been doing dead bodies for 6 years, and it's getting kind of tiresome. I'm probably going to end up going to school just because the military will pay me for it. So they'll pay for my classes, they'll pay for my books, and they will give me a stipend in lieu of a paycheck to live in my area.
That's a big deal, man.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
And it's 4 years worth of schooling that they'll pay for. So if I was to do like a full ride, and so I'm looking at potentially going into doing that, because the pay difference wouldn't be that much different than what I make now, busting my ass 40 to 50 hours a week. Like the other day, I had to bring somebody who was 375 pounds down a very tight stairwell with just me and another person. So I could avoid that and, keep my lower back and my knees at the merely diminished state that they're in, as opposed to completely shred them and go to school and actually find something else to do.
Yeah, and you're still, I feel like you're right around my age, perhaps early 30s.
Thank you, but I am a year to the day younger than Seth. Seth and I share a birthday. I just turned 37. He just turned 38.
Oh, so. Okay. Well, still, it's,
staring 40 in the face. It's right there.
It's still, you've still got plenty of time to think of. You can do a whole career and work for 20 years before you even are thinking about retirement.
Well, yeah, and I'm also, so I get those benefits, and I'm currently in the Army Reserve. I have about 18 or 19 months left before I wrap that up, and then I will be eligible for retirement when I turn 65. So this is the point of most people's career where they're finishing their first career and they dive into a second one anyway. So I'm just kind of going about it in a slightly more roundabout way.
Although I feel like I can interview well, I will have to, be really open about, like, I have no training in this department. I'm very confident that I can learn quickly, but that's what I got. And it would just benefit me a lot particularly to interview with someone who knows me.
Right.
As someone who, very roughly has their stuff together. There's no room to move up as a bartender. You could manage a restaurant, but they don't really make much more, per se. And you could also say that the work's a lot harder. Like, the only time I call a manager is if a customer is so difficult that I have to get back to my work. And so I'm basically, that's the only time I send anyone to a manager.
Right.
Is that I no longer have time for this conversation.
Well, and once you get into management, it becomes less about doing the job and more about the paperwork and the administration side. And some people just don't want to do that. And that's totally understandable.
And that's still not really an up. And so that's what made me really think about it. Like, if I were to start doing something in IT, there's a lot of ways to go up from, someone who answers phone calls and asks you to turn it off and turn it back on.
Right.
I could do that.
Have you tried resetting?
Basic troubleshooting. Got it. Yeah, for sure. Also, I kind of doubt that I'm going to want to work an 8-hour shift on my feet when I'm like 50, I don't think so.
Also fair.
I already have a bad knee. It's just genetic. We'll see where I am in 20 years, but it's not going to get better. That's for sure.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?